This is Small Business Big World, our weekly podcast prepared by the team at Paper Trails. Owning and running a small business is hard. Each week, we'll dive into the challenges, headaches, trends, fun, and excitement of running a small business. After all, small businesses are the heartbeat of America, and our team is here to keep them beating. Welcome to Small Business Big World, our weekly podcast where we talk about all things small business. My name is Chris Cleft. Today I'm joined by Jeff Burnham. Jeff is our sales manager here at Paper Trails. Today we've got an interesting topic that clients ask us about all the time is how do I price myself? How do I price my products? How do I price my services? People are nickel and diming me. How do I handle that? We certainly deal with that in our own business, right?
Oh, we deal with it
Jeff's
every
the
day.
sales guy. He gets those calls all the time.
Absolutely. It's probably the hardest thing a business owner does.
Right.
Try to price it.
And certainly we see a lot of industry standards, right? So in restaurants, there's certain formulas. In retail, there's certain formulas. In a service business, there's certain formulas. But that doesn't always work right for everybody. One of the things that, I tell clients is make sure you're valuing yourself, making sure you're charging for, your services, your products appropriately, right? You cannot stay in business if you are not charging appropriately. Certainly the last couple of years, we've seen rapid inflation, and that's rapid inflation on overhead, on products, on services, on labor. Labor costs have, we're the payroll company. I promise you, people are paying more, right?
Every day.
Every day we get those rate increases, big rate increases. 5 and 10% increases the last couple of years on labor has not been uncommon. So, certainly you got to take that into consideration. So Jeff, what are you seeing when you're out there talking to people? How are people pricing their products? What are you seeing?
I think what's hard is, it depends on the industry. Every industry is a little bit different. So, when we're talking to these business owners, whether it's, a small mom and pop, it's just the two of them trying to run the corner store, or, it's a mechanic running a shop with, 3, 4, 5 guys. It's how do I cover the costs? How do I make sure that I'm charging a cost that's fair to the customer, but also I'm covering my overhead. I'm covering my variable costs. The cost of insurance continues to go up. My health insurance went up. I want to provide my guys a retirement plan. I got to make sure that I can afford that as well. It's all the little things. So that conversation is different every single time. And it's hard to say, this is what your cup of coffee costs. That's the hardest thing.
You talked a lot about variable costs. So let's take that cup of coffee.
Sure.
Right? So when we talk to clients, what's the variable cost of that? Start with that, right? So every cup of coffee, I have a cup price that it costs me to pour that cup of coffee, right?
Absolutely.
And what do you think goes into that?
I mean, you've got things like you've got the wages that are going into that. You've got the cost of the coffee grounds. You've got the cup, the water,
Right.
Everything goes into that.
Right. So that's your variable cost. And then your fixed costs are things like your rent, your insurance, your electric bill. Guess what? You're going to be open 80 hours a week. The electricity is on 80 hours a week, right? You're running water that many times. Those are your fixed costs. Generally speaking, those are, the same every month, right? Your rent is usually the same every month, your mortgage. So, you have to figure out when you are pricing, you got to figure out how to sell enough of your products and keep the variable costs low enough to cover that overhead, right? We had a client come in and she's having an issue in her retail business where she sells a ton of small widgets, right, for $6 or $8. Mm-hmm. And she's like, the margin's great on those. I do a 250, 300% markup. It costs me $3. I sell it for $9. Yep. Well, you got to sell an awful lot of widgets to cover your $3,500 a month rent, to cover your insurance, to cover all of those kind of things.
Correct.
And so, then she has another store where she has much higher priced items, but her markup isn't as good. So she's selling, clothing for $100 a piece, but she pays $60 or $65 for it. So her markup is not even 100%, but she's putting more dollars in the bank. She can sell fewer sweaters and make more money than selling 500 widgets, right? Sure. So just those kind of things in a product mix is important too.
Absolutely. So when you're having that conversation with the client, Chris, how do you get their head to wrap around that when they see my margin's great on the widget, but on the higher end piece of clothing, it's just different?
It's a I call it the product mix, right? Mm-hmm. So in most businesses that sell a product rather than a service, there are different products and different markups, and certainly Some of the higher end things have a lower markup, right? If you're selling a more expensive item, you may not be making as much on that, but again, you put dollars in the bank, not percentages. Correct. And so that's what I try to tell people. Like, you have in your mind, I need 100% markup on every product. Well, that's not necessarily true. You may need, as long as you're 100% across the board, if you're selling some at an 80% markup and some at 150% markup, it balances it out. And so you can get your percentage depending on what you're selling. That particular client, I said, why don't you look at switching up your product mix in that store? Try to get some more edge up a little bit, right? Or that $8 widget they were selling, can you get 10 or 12, right?
Right.
Make you a few extra bucks, and the margin's even better, and you're putting more dollars in the bank, right? So you got to kind of play with it, and that's what's really hard about pricing these products. And certainly, in this situation, the clothing that she's selling is it's a big name brand, and they tell her you can only charge this much, right? So that's a restriction that she's under. We can't. It's not like the widgets she's selling are her own widgets. There's nothing comparable. It's not like you can go online to www.widget.com and or Amazon and price shop, right? So she has a little more flexibility with those products versus the big name clothing that she's selling. So again, there's not a great answer in any scenario, but it's just things you have to think about in order to survive.
Sure.
We have another client that teaches fitness classes.
Yep.
And, same thing. She was really nervous to increase her prices, per class. She charges per class because, I'm afraid people won't show up, right? Well, I promise you, people go to the grocery store every day. They know that a head of lettuce is 3 times what it was 3 years ago, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And, so certainly it cost more. She's like, I made so much less last year. Well, because your rent went up, your electric went up, your insurance went up, your wages went up. You had to pay your teachers, your instructors more every week to teach these classes, but you didn't charge your customers more. And she really had a rough year because the cash flow wasn't there to support a lot of those things. And for her, the variable costs are labor, right? I mean, she has her, she has her studio and things like that, but she has an hourly rate of X dollars an hour for an instructor, and it's getting that hourly rate, multiplied enough to cover the overhead.
Right. And I think a lot of that comes down to when you're going to adjust your prices and you're going to do a price increase, it's letting people know.
Yeah.
Don't surprise them. If you're paying, X number of dollars every single month for, Y service, and then all of a sudden, if it's an auto bill, if that rate just jumped with no warning, I think that's when consumers honestly have that visceral reaction and say, wait a second, what are you doing? But if you indicate, hey, I've got a price increase coming, it's coming on this date, just like everything else in the world, the head of lettuce example, just like everything else, costs are going up, my costs are going up too, but my service stays, at that high level.
Yeah, certainly, we talk a lot about adding value, right? And valuing yourself.
Yep.
We provide a great service to our clients, and we think we do anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
The feedback we get is great. But it's, you can't, I'm not afraid to charge what I need to charge to make sure that our staff is paid appropriately. We have the right benefits. We have the products that we need to service our clients. Someone will come to me and say, can we get something from Staples? Can we order? Like, okay.
Yes, get what you need.
The $13 desk organizer is not going to bankrupt me. Yep. And if that makes your job a little bit easier, that's all the better, right? Yep. Certainly not that we don't want to cut, we don't need to watch our costs, but there are things that, if something's going to make your life easier, take a second and.
But I know even in paper trails, because it's a great example, it's something that I won't say that we wrestle with it, but it's something that we talk about a lot.
Sure.
We're really transparent kind of within our management group about, hey, this is what, our costs are. So this is what our pricing looks like. And we have goals and margins and we want to be able to hit those, but we don't want to gouge.
Absolutely not. You never want. I mean, you want to make a good living to cover your expenses, to pay your employees. We're a small business too, right?
Absolutely.
And, we do business with other small businesses in the community. I want everyone to be successful. And, you know, the reason we do all these types of things, the podcast and all the other content that we put out, the education we put out, is because we want our clients to be successful.
Yep.
And, you know, if they're successful, we're successful.
Absolutely.
If they're hiring more employees, we're making more money.
Correct.
You know, and it goes around
Yep.
and so forth. So for us to be able to do that, you know, the value that we provide is so much more than just the widget, or, you know, payroll's a commodity, right?
Right.
You can call 1-800-payroll company all day, every day.
Yep.
I know you say all the time, what's your line?
Payroll is not cool.
Payroll's not
cool. But and it's one of these things where, you know, we wrestle with that pricing piece, but, you know, since day one in our quote, it is said, we won't nickel and dime you because we don't like to be nickeled and dimed. Right. When pricing is transparent, it makes life easier for everybody. You know that, you know, if I'm going to add an employee, it's going to cost me this, you know, or, hey, Paper Trails is going to change its pricing, adjust its pricing in some way. You know, here's your notice that this is going to happen. Right. And inevitably, I think in any business, you're still going to get those customers that say, I didn't know you were doing this. Well, I told you 90 days ago and 60 days ago and 30 days ago.
But I think it's a
and
good
there was
opportunity to
sign.
have that conversation too,
always.
right? I mean, say, listen, these are the things that we can help you with in addition that are already included in what we do every day.
And your services.
You know, and you tell people all the time, we're not the low-cost provider.
Never going to be.
But we do this, and this
Sure.
to help bring value to the product.
Yep.
You know, it's not, again, you can call the big guys, you can call all day, any day. I bet you could find someone that's going to beat us on price.
Sure.
But we price our services based on the value that we're providing.
That's correct.
And, you know, even some of our local competitors, our staff is twice the size of some of our local competitors with similar number of clients and services. And I think it's because we focus a little more on what we're doing.
Yep.
And again, that's why it's more expensive, right?
It is. And
we're more proactive in a lot of things.
It is. And we want, you know, as an organization, we want our customers to be able to call. They want to call a 207 number. They want to get, you know, Carrie, who they've seen at a PTA meeting or they've seen at a game, or, you know, they've seen Carrie come into their restaurant. They want to be able to see that and know that person. And, you know, with in a lot of industries, they talk about knowing your customer. We absolutely know our customers.
Sure.
We know them. We know because we ask. We want to know what are the goals. You know,
Yeah.
Do you have an expansion coming? Or is retirement in the horizon? You know, anything like that, we want to know so that we can help them and bring them that value and get them referred to the people that, you know, potentially they need to talk to help with those services.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the value that we create, you know, and looking outside, you know, in other industries, there's different ways to add value every time, right? And it's always, you have to differentiate yourself from your competition because, you know, my father owns a restaurant, right? So I always go around town and I say, hey, how much is a garden salad and a cheeseburger at every restaurant in town, right? Because those are pretty standard products.
Right.
There's not a lot you're differentiating unless you've got a Wagyu beef or something like that. You know, I can tell you everyone gets their burgers from the same guy down the street.
And they're good burgers.
They're great burgers, you know, but it's those types, that's the baseline, right?
Sure.
And then, okay, that's the standard on the menu. But then how do you, again, create your product mix to be able to, you know, adjust and price appropriately? You know, we look at a 30% food cost in a restaurant industry typically. And, you know, the burger is what it is. It's $3.99 or $4.29 a pound or whatever it is now. You know, your bun is 25 cents, your cheese is 20 cents, your lettuce, tomato, onion, French fries, ketchup, you know, all those things, multiply that by a little over 3 and you get your price, right? That's a pretty standard formula and everyone's doing that across the board. So when you're looking at your competition, look at your baseline. Competition's not, it's important to see what the market looks like.
Correct.
You know,
if
you're charging $50 for a cheeseburger and the guy next door is charging 15, why, right?
Yeah.
What real value are you giving in that, right? And I would say in one of the most competitive industries is the restaurant business in terms of pricing. You know, I can tell you that's always the number one review is, oh gosh, it was so expensive to take my family to dinner. Well, I can also promise you that it's expensive to go to the grocery store and buy that. You have
I
3
do.
children.
I mean, I'll use myself as an example. You know, a family of 5 for us to go out to dinner. My wife and I, we know before walking in the door, you know, here's the 3-digit number it starts at.
Yeah.
You know, and then the grocery store, you know, we kind of make it a game. I hate to say that. It's, you know, we know that it's going to cost us, you know, this many hundreds of dollars this week to go buy groceries. Can we get it below that? You know, what can we find that's on sale this week that's going to get us below that? So those prices are, you're constantly seeing it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And everyone's price conscious, right? You got to be. I mean, in this day and age, things are so expensive, and life has gotten so much more expensive, for sure. So, one of my clients came in the other day and said, I just went and dropped my truck off at so and so's shop, and he's got the big sign on the wall, $125 an hour, right? And I stopped and I said to him, $125 an hour. Think about what that goes into it.
There's a lot in there.
What's a skilled mechanic cost today, right?
Sure.
Our cars are computers. They're not,
Correct. All day.
It's right. I mean, so you have to have the mechanical knowledge. You have to have the technical knowledge now. It's not just unscrewing a bolt and screwing it back in anymore.
Sure.
It's unscrewing the bolt, screwing it back in, and plugging the computer in to see, did I fix the error code, right?
Yeah. Did I put the screw back in right?
Right.
To be honest.
Right.
I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah. And so you're probably looking at labor of $40-$50 an hour for a skilled, auto technician, right? They're not called mechanics anymore. They're auto technicians.
Yes.
And that's their way of creating value, is saying, hey, we're going to change the title. They are automotive technicians, right? They are not mechanics anymore, because it's much more than mechanical, right?
Right.
So, when you think about that, you're looking at $40, plus you have health benefits. Everyone asks us, what's it cost me to have an employee? You've got your straight.
This is the big question we get.
You got your straight wage. You have your employer taxes, which on average are going to be between 8 and 10%.
Yep.
Though it's a little bit variable, and we could talk about that some other time with caps and things like that. But certainly, that's the baseline, right? Those are the mandatory requirements. But you got workers' comp, and in an automotive area, that's a higher premium than in an office job.
That's correct.
So you're looking at, that's a percentage of your wages. If you're offering any benefits, right? Health insurance is great. It's the gold standard. It's what everyone wants, of course. But gosh, it's expensive.
Yeah.
You're looking potentially $500 to $1,000 a month for just an individual.
Let alone a family.
Yeah. So, you've got big costs associated with that. Generally speaking, I can tell you here at Paper Trails, our cost is about 20% more than the straight wage in benefits and taxes and workers' comp and all those kind of things. And, 20 to 30% is not uncommon on top of your wage. So if you're spending $40, you could add another $10 basic at the minimum per hour just to cover that stuff.
Sure.
Then you have, again, your overhead, the light bill, the rent, all that stuff, education to keep those guys up to date. That $125 an hour gets eaten real quick.
It really does. And you think about it, not even just thinking about a dealership, but you go to the local guy who has been servicing your vehicle since you got your first vehicle when you're 16, 18, 20 years old. The investment he makes in his business every year, whether it's a new lift or an alignment machine or the technology he has to just have there to be able to read the code that says, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's a huge investment on their part.
Yeah, and we were talking about that this morning, right? Investing in your business. And
all day.
We have a friend in our industry who is grossly undercharges their clients.
Yep.
And we tell them all the time, you need to value your services, you need to invest in your services, you wonder why, you're rubbing two nickels together to make it, work at the end of the week, because you're not charging enough.
Right.
And this is, for the exact same service, we're charging 3 times what they charge. But we don't have any problems delivering on the promises that we make. We don't have any problems staffing ourselves. Generally speaking, we're not working nights and weekends. Certain times a year, of
certain
course.
Times a year, absolutely. But
there's we're not working ourselves to the bone, because it is what it is. And their argument was, well, my clients can't afford it, and it's a real argument. But those clients have business decisions to make every day as well.
Correct.
Right. And they can choose not to work with you, and that may seem like a bad thing, a scary thing, right? Gosh, I lost a client or I lost a customer. But maybe that customer was dragging you down financially, labor, and mentally and physically and so forth. So you can now take that time, or give yourself the time back. You could take that time and turn around and go find a client that's going to pay you twice as much, and is going to appreciate the work that you do.
I think it comes down to the appreciation part, because, we've talked about this a lot over the years, that, we've talked about, people say they're a great customer.
Yeah.
Well, they're a great customer. Everybody is a great customer.
Absolutely.
But
nobody wants to be a pain in the ass.
No,
nobody wants to be that, right?
No, but there are times where there's a little pain and suffering that goes on there too, and maybe that pain and suffering, you have to weigh that out. Is the pain and suffering worth it? sometimes. I hate to say that. It's awful to say, but we have that conversation on a semi-regular basis.
And not every customer is right for every business, right? I mean, there are times we take a look at someone, we have a conversation with them, we evaluate their needs, right? We're always in our service industry, of course. It's much more difficult in a retail or that kind of environment, a restaurant. You can't stop and say, oh no.
Yeah, you can't have a cheeseburger today.
Right, you look like you're gonna be a nightmare. Sorry, you can't come have a cheeseburger, right? That's really hard. We recognize that.
Right.
We're very fortunate in our industry that we're evaluating our clients just as much as they're evaluating us. We're evaluating them. And we're not afraid to say, I don't think we're the right fit, right? Because other times what we've done is if we feel they're going to be painful, we will price that way, right? And that's I won't say that it's a pain tax, but we know we're going to have to spend more time with this client, and we need to compensate for that, right?
It's about the labor that's going to have to go into that relationship, because we try to do as much due diligence up front before we enter into an engagement. Tell me about your business. Tell me what your needs are. We learn about the pain points. Pain points are different for everybody, but we want to learn about that to know, okay, you're going to need, 3 times more help from the team than somebody else. Well, then we've got to factor that in there.
Absolutely.
And we're transparent about that. Your needs are great. We're going to have to make sure that person is dedicated and there and available. And when you call, the phone gets picked up.
And when you're talking about building, selling widgets and so forth, that's again a little different conversation. But I'll tell you right now, I've gone through Disney Institute training for customer service and so forth. Disney will not sell tickets to people that have been issues in the past, right? They have a special call center for folks that are their painful clients. Everybody, you can come up with something, because guess what? You don't want that client to detract from giving great service to everybody else. So they even segregate their clients and their customers from going into parks and things like that. So there are multitudes of different things you can do to try to prevent that. We have a couple of local friends who are restaurant owners who might be the keyboard warrior after the reviews. I'm not so sure that's the best way to go after it, but certainly you can see please don't come back. Hey, thank you so much. I'm sorry we couldn't meet your expectations. Here, we're going to take care of dinner tonight, but maybe not come back next time, right? I don't think that's impolite to say.
No.
Because again, it's only dragging you and the rest of the staff and the rest of your customers down, and it's creating an environment in that restaurant or whatever it is. Don't say, GTFO,
Right. You don't want to do that. You don't want to
be polite about it, right? You always want to exit gracefully. That's certainly.
We always like to say, in the unlikely event that a relationship has to end for us, we want to part as friends. And we want to make sure that, if we weren't the right fit for somebody or the experience wasn't right, okay, where are you going? Tell us what they need. We're happy to provide the information you need, no matter what the service is. It doesn't feel good, when a relationship like that ends. But sometimes it's the right thing to do.
But there's no need for animus. There's no need for everyone to go away angry, because it's just it ends
because
poorly.
We're going to end up seeing them someplace else in life, and you want to still be able to say, "Hi, Joe, how are you?" and get Joe to say hello back.
Absolutely. So when you talk about creating value, it's also about setting expectations.
Correct.
Right. We do that all the time, right? We will do this for this, but the timeline is this.
Right.
And I think that's important in pricing too. And, we had a little bit of a bum rush, a rushed deadline recently. And I said, this is, quite frankly, we just don't have time for this. And I wish when we started this, I could have said, because we have a very, very compressed timeline for what you need this, it's going to cost a little more.
Right. But, when we disclose price, we stick to it and we don't change it. So, even though the time horizon may have shrunk and we have to get it done, it still gets done.
And measuring those expectations ahead of time and setting deadlines. We do that all the time. I mean, we're a very deadline-driven business. From federal standards and payday. Right, payday is a deadline.
Oh yeah.
And we tell our clients, if you don't send us payroll by this date at this time, you're not going to get paid.
Right.
Now we can work with you and figure things out. If you don't have money, if you need this, if you need, whatever, there's
whatever's
solutions.
Going on, just communicate.
But the expectation has been set from day one that you need to do your part in order for us to do our part.
Sure.
So, we've talked a lot about value and pricing and What else do you hear from people?
It's interesting. Paper Trails as a brand it's a wonderful brand and with a wonderful reputation. I think a lot of that, I'm not going to blow smoke here, so don't get a big head on me. But a lot of it is and there are a lot of folks that I jokingly refer to it internally as the full Chris experience. There are clients we take on that I only want Chris. And, Chris has a lot of bandwidth, but Chris can't service 900 plus clients and be available to 900 plus clients.
And that's been a real struggle for us as a business as we've grown from clients that we've had for a long, long time. And we've had to move around or shift. And not that the service is any less than it was when I was doing it.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, there's a relationship value.
100%.
And we talk about how to price that, right? We had that conversation yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Someone wanted the full, I only want to deal with Chris. And I think you said that, we have to keep them, the great and powerful eyes behind the curtain.
Exactly. But we go a little, the Heisman analogy, whatever we need to do just to kind of keep that little bit of distance.
But if that's the expectation, now certainly my capacity as an individual is like you said, I think I'm pretty good at that, but I can't do everything for everybody. No. And so we have to say no sometimes to that. And I think that's an expectation you have to set. And sometimes, hey, gosh, if you're willing to pay for it, you want to pay whatever, those are decisions we make too. And that's, those are pricing decisions we have a conversation about every day too. And again, in our industry, it's much more bespoke. It's much more customized. We are able to evaluate this and price appropriately for that. But it's no different than a lawyer, right?
Sure.
Guess what? The associate's $300 an hour, the partner's $500 an hour,
sure.
The paralegal's $250. You're paying for a level of service in that, and that's how they bill, right?
Yep.
And I'm sure they have in their heads, hey, the associate makes $150 an hour, and we've got to cover this overhead and that overhead, and the copier, and actually they bill you per page and stuff, right?
Right.
So, but
whether it's printed or scanned,
those are different ways that everyone makes money. It's pricing yourself. We tend to be more inclusive.
Sure.
When we price. Some people are pricing. I don't want to say nickel and dimed, but they're more granular in their pricing. So everybody has a different way of doing things. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do it because it's such a hard task. It's so hard to sit there and map it out.
Yep.
Because, hey, I may have a pretty good idea of what my fixed costs are and what my break-even point is to cover that, right? I have to sell 500 cheeseburgers a night to cover my $40,000 rent, right? Mm-hmm. Those are things you can say, but then you have to do it. And you have
That's where the rubber meets the road. That's the hardest part, actually doing it.
Right. You can model it all day long to get to your break even, but then you got to say, all right, can I do it?
Yeah.
Right. Can I actually, when I open those doors, are the people going to come? Mm-hmm. Am I going to sell the widgets? Am I going to sell the cheeseburgers?
Yep.
Am I going to be able to sell my services? And even for us, we look at growth and staffing. I mean, staffing is our greatest single expense in our business. And we try to keep ahead of our growth so that we're hiring ahead of our needs, which certainly costs a little bit more. But in my opinion, I'd rather be ahead of it than behind it.
Right.
We have been behind it before, where we've all been pulling the very little hair we have left out, and because we weren't ahead of it, right? We have not staffed appropriately in that and that kind of thing. So, it's every business has different challenges and different things.
But it's interesting you bring that up because at the latter part of 2023, I'll say late October, early November, we're really good at, looking at our pipeline. What's the work look like coming in for whether it's January 1st or, any time in the new year. And then we try to plan. And then when we look at the pipeline and if something doesn't look like it's going to happen, or they've gone down another road, or it's been pushed out to the latter part of 2024, that helps drive some of the staffing decisions we make because we try to get ahead of it. And you might run a little, it might be a little tight for a real short period of time, but you can't do that to yourself for half a year.
And we're fortunate. We know what's coming in. We know our workload. We're very measured in that. Yep. Certainly in a restaurant, right? What restaurant owner hasn't had a Tuesday night where, gosh, Tuesdays we usually do 100 covers and this Tuesday we did 250, right? Yep. Why? Nobody can tell. It just happened.
Yep.
That's always a challenge for sure. The random snowstorm or whatever. So there's, certainly we have it better than a lot of folks, in planning that stuff. But that comes into pricing too. I mean, that's, we have to know that we've got to build a little cushion in, just this tiny little cushion for us to stay ahead of that. Because right now we're hiring 2 or 3 people a year to manage our growth. And I know, again, if I want to stay ahead of it, I got to kind of collect a little extra to be able to stay ahead of that. So those are things that we take into consideration too.
Always.
Wow, great. Lots of good conversation today. Hopefully we've just given some insight into folks about how to price your products, how to price your services, how to value yourself. Certainly, that's the biggest piece of it. You have to stay in business. You can't sell your widgets. You can't service your clients if you're not in business. So,
that's correct.
And that starts with the top line. So we tell clients that all the time. Certainly, if you want to get in touch with either of us, you can follow us on Instagram at Paper Trails Payroll. You can visit our website, papertrails.com. I'm Chris at Paper Trails. Jeff is Jeff at papertrails.com. So we are always available if there's anything we can help with in this subject or any other subject. Surely be sure to subscribe, follow, share all of our podcast episodes. It's at Small Business Big World, smallbusinessbigworld.com. You can email us, smallbusinessbigworldpodcast@gmail.com. John gave me a really long one there.
He did.
Smallbusinessbigworldpodcast@gmail.com. And we do have our Facebook group as well for engagement. Feel free to reach out. If there's any topics you want to talk about or questions, we certainly can do that. So,
absolutely.
Thanks very much for listening this week, and we will see you all next Tuesday.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Small Business Big World. This podcast is a production of Paper Trails. We are a payroll and HR company based in Kennebunk, Maine, and we serve small and mid-sized businesses across New England and the country. If you found this podcast helpful, don't forget to follow us at Paper Trails Payroll across all social media platforms, and check us out at papertrails.com for more information. As a reminder, the views, opinions, and thoughts expressed by the hosts and guests alone. The material presented in this podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be considered legal or financial advice. By inviting this guest to our podcast, Paper Trails does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific individual, organization, product, or service.